This conference will now be recorded.
Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. So this is Connect the Dots, session number 5 of many to come, probably. And what I'd like to talk about today is the idea of connecting the dots regarding the subject of personal resurrection. We tend to think that the teaching of a personal resurrection from the dead is a New Testament teaching primarily. There are many verses in the Old Testament. They believed in a personal resurrection. They came to understand that a life after death must include a new body, not that we remain a spirit departed from our body for eternity, but God has designed a new body for us. We call it the resurrection from the dead. We serve a God who raises the dead, Paul said in 2 Corinthians 1. And the fact that he created us in the beginning to live forever in a body, soul, and spirit makeup of ourself, uh, he's going to continue that original purpose. He didn't change his purpose just because sin entered. He wants humans to live forever in a body. We're going to call it eventually a glorified body. But the idea of it is found in the Old Testament scriptures and then brought over into the New Testament. And so we'll start this Connect the Dots session on personal resurrection from Job chapter 14 and verse 14. If a man dies, shall he live again? That's a question that humans have asked from the beginning. All the days of my hard service I will wait till my change comes. And Paul's going to pick up on this kind of language of change, a change of bodies, necessarily to fit our perfect spirit, our sinless perfect spirit. We need a new body. Right now, we as children of God are in conflict because our body is decaying, but our spirit has been made sinless and perfect. So God has designed a new body for us, and Job calls it till my change comes. Then he expands on this idea in chapter 19. In verse 25 we'll start, for I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth. So we may have to end up reading this again when we deal with some ideas about the return of Christ. But Job understood way back there that the Redeemer is going to stand on the earth. Now, it was developed later that it would involve two different comings separated by a long gap of time. But the angel told the disciples in Acts chapter 1 that he's going to return in like manner. And he ascended from the Mount of Olives. And Zechariah 14, of course, says that he shall stand on the Mount of Olives. So right here is a great truth that Job shares with us about the Redeemer standing on the earth. And it's at that time that the resurrection takes place. So he says, and after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God. So the Redeemer in verse 25 is God in verse 26. And we come to know that to be Jesus the Christ, born of the Virgin Mary, who is coming back again. But Job makes a real interesting remark here that our current skin, our current body is going to be destroyed. But still, in our flesh, we're going to see God. So it's not just the idea that when we die, our spirit goes to be with the Lord and we get to see him then. Job says that the ultimate goal is to see him in flesh, not flesh and blood, not sinful carnal bodies, but in a an eternal body that will be suitable for our eternal spirit. He says, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. So we don't lose our identity at death. And we pick up a new body in the resurrection. But he said, whom I shall see for myself. It's still Job. And my eyes shall behold, and not another, how my heart yearns within me. And then there's several in the Psalms. And so when they sang their, what we call gospel songs, hymns, but when they sang their songs of praise and petition and so forth to God, many of them written by David, of course, and Solomon, the idea of personal resurrection was a part of their song making and song singing. Psalm 17 and 15 says, as for me, I will see your face in righteousness. So again, we could say, well, that's when we die, our spirit goes to be with the Lord and we will see his face. But he goes on to say, I shall be satisfied when I awake. This idea of waking from sleep is often connected with the idea of resurrection of the body. And so he talks about, I shall be satisfied when I awake in your likeness. So, of course, Paul picks up on this and others about we shall receive a body like his glorious body. But Job really had quite an understanding here. Excuse me, not Job. We've already passed that as David. When I awake in your likeness. So not just an understanding of a personal resurrection, but an understanding of what kind of body that his people will receive in the resurrection, a body like unto Christ's body. John talked about that in 1 John chapter 3. Paul, of course, in Philippians 3, 1 Corinthians 15, all those great New Testament passages. But we're seeing a clarity of the details of the personal resurrection. Then in Psalm 49 and 15, this is a psalm written by the sons of Korah, and he says in 49:15, but God will redeem my soul from the power of the grave, for he shall receive me. Now, soul is made up of body and spirit, and so the idea here is that it's going to be redeemed. There's a redemption of the body that Paul loved to talk about, and yet way back here in the time of the Psalms, it was being sung about. And then Psalm 71 in verse 20, you who have shown me great and severe troubles shall revive me again. So we think, well, it's just kind of a revival in this life, but it seems to be going beyond that. A reviving again, a coming to life again, an awakening from sleep. Because he goes on to say that this revive me again involves and bring me up again from the depths of the earth. So it's the body that goes back to the earth, the spirit goes back to God who gave it. And but this is talking about reviving from the depths of the earth, the idea of a resurrection. And then Psalm 133 and verse 3, it is like the dew of Hermon descending upon the mountains of God. For there the Lord commanded the blessing. And what was the blessing? Life forevermore. Well, the verses we have just read says that includes a body. So life evermore is not just about eternal spirit, but it's about a spirit being joined to a body suitable for it, and that being forever, life forevermore. And then Brother Isaiah gets into the picture, Isaiah 26. And we're talking about personal resurrection. There'll be another video done about what we might call group or corporate resurrection. But I'm just talking about the idea that an individual can know that they will be resurrected from the dead. hopefully in a glorified body if they belong to the Lord. Isaiah 26:19. So he's talking about Isaiah himself, and he'd been talking about back in verse 17, as a woman with child is in pain and cries out in her pangs. When she draws near the time of her delivery, so we have been in your sight. We've been with child, we are in pain. So the resurrection is also the idea that it comes after a time of travail. And that could be the travail of this life. It could be the travail of facing physical death. Certainly it is applied to the travail, the great tribulation time leading to the return of Christ. But afterwards, it says in verse 19, your dead shall live. Well, I thought if you were a child of God, that your spirit went to be with the Lord and you were still alive. So this is something beyond the spirit. Your dead shall live. Together with my dead body, they shall arise. Now, this is Isaiah's personal resurrection. He understood that sometime in the future, his dead body shall arise. And he goes on to talk about, awake and sing, you who dwell in dust, for your dew is like the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out. The New American Standard and some other translations have this as the earth shall give birth to the dead, because the idea is that the earth is the womb where a dead body goes in and a new body comes out. And certainly the end of the process of the new birth is a birth of a new body given to that spirit that already was made new. So the earth shall cast out the dead. And so Isaiah came to understand in his own life that he would have a personal resurrection. Brother Daniel also came to understand this, or actually was told this, in Daniel chapter 12, at the end of that book, the very last verse. But you, the Lord talking to Daniel, go your way till the end. That's the timing of the resurrection. For you shall rest and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days. So it gives the timing of it, gives the fact of it, and it speaks of it as a rest, or other verses speak about it as sleep or revival. So all these are just really great descriptions of how the Old Testament saints understood there would be a personal resurrection. And then in Hosea 13, in verse 11, 14, Hosea 13:14, I will ransom them from the power of the grave. I will redeem them from death. And then this is where Paul quotes in 1 Corinthians 15, O death, I will be your plagues. O grave, I will be your destruction. Pity is hidden from my eyes. Paul uses a little bit different language, but he's quoting this in 1 Corinthians 15. Then we go into the New Testament. Of course, there's many. I will save most of them for the idea of a corporate or group resurrection in another session. But 1 Corinthians 15 is, of course, the resurrection chapter. And we find out many of the details of a personal resurrection in this chapter. And I'll just read a portion of it, 1 Corinthians 15 and 35. But someone will say, how are the dead raised up? And with what body do they come? Foolish ones, what you sow is not made alive unless it dies. Jesus spoke about that. And what you sow, you do not sow that body that shall be, but mere grain, perhaps wheat or some other grain. But God gives it a body as he pleases, and to each seed its own body. So evidently there's going to be what's called our own body, maybe some distinctions in some way. It's going to be like Christ, but it won't be exactly like Christ. Only he will have his glorified body. Each of us will also. And there's going to be some distinctions, even though it is said to be like his body. And the idea is it's his kind of body, the nature of his glorified body, but not certainly meaning we're going to look just like him in every way. Verse 39, all flesh is not the same flesh, but there is one kind of flesh of men, another flesh of animals, another of fish, another of birds. There are also celestial bodies and terrestrial bodies, but the glory of the celestial is one, and the glory of the terrestrial is another. There is one glory of the sun, another glory of the moon, another glory of the stars. For one star differs from another star in glory. So also is the resurrection of the dead. The body is sown in corruption, it is raised in incorruption. So Paul is just expanding on what Job and David, Daniel, Isaiah, what they all said in shorter language. Paul is expanding on that. The body is sown in corruption, it is raised in incorruption. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. So the contrast between our body now and our body in the resurrection. It is sown a natural body, is raised a spiritual body, but still a body. That's the point. It's still a body. God created us to have physicality, locality, identity of body, soul, and spirit, three in one, like unto his image. And so our eternity is not spirits in heaven, it's glorified bodies on earth. And I think that's really important to understand that point. It has raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. And so it is written, the first man Adam became a living being, the last Adam became a life-giving spirit. That's Christ, of course. However, the spiritual is not first, but the natural, afterward the spiritual. So there's an order to things, of course, and death must happen, or a rapture, for some who are alive when he comes. But for most people, it requires death first. And even in the rapture, there will be a separation of spirit from this body, so a death in some sense, and being given a new body. Verse 47, the first man was of the earth, made of dust. The second man is the Lord from heaven. As was the man of dust, so also are those who are made of dust. And as is the heavenly man, so also are those who are heavenly. And as we have borne the image of the man of dust, the first Adam, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly man, the last Adam, Christ. And Paul says that in Philippians 3. For this session, I think I'm just going to go ahead and close, because we'll get into more resurrection verses on the idea of group or corporate resurrection. But we must include Abraham in this whole discussion, that he came to understand that there was going to be a personal resurrection. And we are told that explicitly in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 17. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, in Isaac your seed shall be called. Concluding, why did he conclude this? That God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. Abraham knew that the promises given to him depended on Isaac living and having children, this promised seed that would become a great nation. So he understood that even in raising that knife, ready to plunge it into Isaac, offer him as a sacrifice, that God would raise Isaac from the dead, because his faith was strong enough at that point to believe that in some way God would allow Isaac to live on even after death. And of course, the principle of that was even earlier. I think Abraham really came to understand it quite clearly, in that he and his wife Sarah's dead bodies, and that's what it says in these passages back in verse 11. By faith Sarah also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore from one man, and him as good as dead, were born many as the stars, and so forth. So God brought life out of death in their physical bodies in the birth of Isaac. So that's the principle behind resurrection. And I think that helped reinforce in Abraham that God would raise Isaac from the dead if he went through with that sacrifice. So many Old Testament saints understood clearly a personal resurrection from the dead. And there's probably other verses we could read, but that's a string of verses connecting the dots on the subject of personal resurrection. May God bless you, and I hope this will be a blessing to you.